3 camp counselors made eye contact with people who shouldn't exist. June 2016, Oregon wilderness. Marcus Webb's chest-mounted GoPro captured something impossible during a routine 5-day expedition. Other guides. Moving through the trees. Wearing windbreakers and cargo pants from the 1990s. But here's what made Marcus's hands shake when he reviewed the footage 4 months later. They looked directly at his camera, made eye contact, then quickly turned away, like they could see him, like they knew they'd been caught. The Forest Service had no permits for those dates. The camp had no records of other groups. And the clothing, authentic 1990s outdoor gear with specific brand logos, wear patterns, and fading that costume experts confirmed couldn't be faked, created a timeline problem no one could solve. Because when Marcus finally identified who these mystery guides were, he discovered something that made the footage even more disturbing. They'd filed their own report in 1990 about seeing impossible hikers from the future in the exact same location. 2 groups, 2 decades, 1 forest, and they'd both been watching each other. Drop a comment if you've ever felt like you were being watched on a hiking trail, because after this story, you'll never look at the wilderness the same way. And hit subscribe, because this is the most documented case of temporal overlap in American history. Pine Ridge Youth Camp had operated in Oregon's Cascade foothills since 1978, providing urban teenagers with 3-week wilderness immersion programs every summer. The camp specialized in leadership development through outdoor education, teaching navigation, survival skills, and environmental stewardship to groups of 15 to 20 participants aged 14 to 17. By 2016, the program had earned a reputation for safety, professionalism, and life-changing experiences that turned city kids into confident outdoorsmen. That June, 3 veteran counselors, Marcus Webb, Sarah Daugherty, and James Kowalski, prepared to lead their annual capstone expedition, a 5-day backpacking loop through designated wilderness areas 30 miles from the main camp. All 3 had guided this route for years. They knew every switchback, every water source, every camping zone approved by the Forest Service. This trip represented the culmination of weeks of training, and the counselors took their responsibility seriously. Marcus, the lead guide at 29, had invested in a chest-mounted GoPro for the 2016 season. His reasoning was practical. The footage would serve as both a training resource for future counselors and a promotional tool for camp fundraising. He filmed constantly. Morning departures, trail instruction moments, campsite setups. The camera became such a routine presence that everyone forgot it was recording. The group consisted of the 3 counselors and 16 participants, all between 15 and 17 years old. They departed camp on June 12th, under clear skies, following a well-marked trail system that climbed through Douglas fir forests before opening into alpine meadows. The itinerary was conservative by design, 12 miles maximum per day, with established camping zones that provided both scenic value and safety margins. Nothing unusual occurred during the trek itself. The weather held. The participants thrived. Marcus's GoPro captured exactly what you'd expect. Teenagers learning to filter water, counselors teaching map reading skills, evening circles where young people shared personal breakthroughs. By June 16th, when the group returned to Pine Ridge's main facility, everyone agreed it had been one of the best expeditions in years. Marcus didn't review his footage immediately. The remainder of summer kept all 3 counselors busy with subsequent groups, equipment maintenance, and end-of-season reporting. It wasn't until October, 4 months after the trip, that Marcus finally sat down to organize his video files for the camp's winter newsletter and next year's orientation materials. He started chronologically, watching the first day's departure. Standard stuff. Then the second day's climb toward Desolation Ridge. More standard content. But 23 minutes into day 3's footage, something appeared in the background that made Marcus pause the video and lean closer to his screen. Behind the main group, perhaps 40 yards off trail through the trees, 3 figures were visible, moving parallel to the 2016 counselors. The image quality was sharp enough to see details, windbreakers in teal and purple color-blocking styles, high-waisted khaki pants, hiking boots with distinctive white rubber soles. One figure wore a fanny pack. Another had a disposable camera hanging from their neck. Marcus's first thought was simple. Another camp group must have been in the area, but that didn't make sense. Pine Ridge coordinated closely with other youth organizations to prevent trail congestion, and no other groups had been scheduled for that wilderness zone during their dates. He kept watching. Over the next 6 minutes of footage, the background figures appeared intermittently through gaps in the forest. They were clearly leading their own group of young people, though the participants mostly stayed out of frame. The mystery counselors moved with practiced efficiency, occasionally stopping to gesture at landmarks or consult what appeared to be paper maps. The clothing bothered Marcus most. Every detail screamed mid-1990s, not retro fashion, but authentic period gear that outdoor enthusiasts would immediately recognize. The specific color combinations, the cut of the jackets, even the style of the water bottles clipped to their belts belonged to a different decade. Marcus called Sarah and James. Sarah Doherty arrived at Marcus's apartment that evening with the skepticism of someone who'd spent 6 years guiding wilderness programs without encountering anything stranger than curious black bears. James Kowalski brought pizza and his own laptop, assuming they'd find a simple explanation within minutes. Both counselors expected Marcus had misidentified casual hikers wearing vintage gear from thrift stores. Then Marcus played the footage. "There," he said, pausing at the 23-minute mark. Background, left side through the trees. Sarah leaned forward. The figures were unmistakable. 3 adults in outdoor gear that looked simultaneously familiar and wrong. "Could be anyone," she said, though her voice lacked conviction. "Retro fashion is trendy." "Keep watching," Marcus replied. The video continued. At the 25-minute mark, one of the mystery figures turned directly toward Marcus's camera, toward the 2016 group, and appeared to make eye contact before quickly looking away. The movement was reflexive, startled, the kind of reaction people have when they unexpectedly notice someone watching them. "They saw you," James said quietly. "Or saw the camera." Marcus nodded. "Now watch this part from day 4. He jumped ahead to footage filmed on June 15th, during the group's descent toward Thunder Creek. This segment showed the 2016 counselors taking a water break on a rocky outcrop with sweeping views of the valley below. In the background, perhaps 70 yards down a parallel trail, the same 3 mystery figures appeared again, this time clearly visible in full daylight. The details were impossible to miss. One woman wore a teal windbreaker with purple geometric patterns along the sleeves, a design instantly recognizable to anyone who'd lived through the 1990s outdoor gear boom. Her hair was styled in a practical ponytail, held with a scrunchie that matched her jacket. The man beside her consulted a folded paper map with visible wear at the creases. The third guide, another woman, carried what appeared to be an early model walkie-talkie clipped to her belt, bulky with an extended antenna that modern radios had long since abandoned. "That's not vintage fashion," Sarah said slowly. "That's actual period clothing. Look at the wear patterns, the fading. You can't fake that kind of authenticity." James was already typing on his laptop. "What wilderness permit zone were we in during that section?" "District 7, Marcus answered. "Desolation Ridge to Thunder Creek Corridor." James pulled up the Forest Service's historical permit database, a publicly accessible archive that logged every approved wilderness expedition since 1985. He filtered for District 7, June 1990. If another group was out there 26 years ago, they'd need a permit. Let me check June 10th through 20th, accounting for overlap. The search returned 3 results: a solo backpacker, a family group of 4, and an Audubon Society bird survey team. No youth camp expeditions. No groups matching the size or composition visible in Marcus's footage. "Try Pine Ridge's internal records," Sarah suggested. Maybe we had another group out there in 1990 that didn't file properly with the Forest Service. Marcus had already thought of this. He pulled out his phone and showed them an email exchange with Patricia Morrison, the camp's director since 1982. Patricia had personally reviewed Pine Ridge's expedition logs from June 1990. No groups had been scheduled for the Desolation Ridge area. The camp's only wilderness expedition that month had taken place in an entirely different mountain range, 60 miles north. "So who are they?" James asked. Nobody answered. The three counselors sat in Marcus's living room, watching the frozen image of figures who shouldn't exist. Figures who wore clothing from 1990, who led their own group of young campers, who appeared in 2016 footage with impossible clarity. Sarah broke the silence with the question all three were thinking. Should we tell someone about this? Marcus had already considered and dismissed that option. Tell them what? That we filmed ghosts? Time travelers? We need to understand what we're actually seeing before we report anything. The investigation began with clothing forensics. Sarah, whose mother had worked in outdoor retail during the 1990s, spent the weekend identifying specific brands and models from the video stills Marcus had extracted. Her findings created a portrait of authentic period detail that exceeded any reasonable costume effort. The teal windbreaker belonged to a Columbia sportswear line discontinued in 1993. The specific color blocking pattern, teal base with purple geometric accents, had been part of a single-season collection that outdoor gear collectors now sought on vintage auction sites. Sarah found exact matches on eBay, where sellers explicitly dated the jackets to 1992-1993 production runs. The cargo pants showed similar authenticity, high-waisted with wide legs, featuring snap closures and specific pocket configurations that matched LL Bean's 1989-1994 catalog designs. The hiking boots, visible in several clear frames, were Vask sundowners with distinctive white rubber rand details that the manufacturer had phased out by 1996. This isn't someone dressing up, Sarah explained during their Tuesday evening meeting at Marcus's apartment. This is someone wearing actual clothing from that era. Clothing that shows appropriate wear, sun fading on the shoulders, dirt staining at the hemline. Even the way the jacket creases suggests years of use. James had pursued a different angle. Technology. The walkie-talkie visible on one guide's belt was a Motorola model that cross-referenced with law enforcement and wilderness rescue equipment from the early 1990s. The disposable camera around another guide's neck, clearly a Kodak with yellow housing, matched designs available from 1988 through 1995. But the most disturbing evidence came from enhanced analysis of the mystery guides' faces. Marcus had sent several high-resolution stills to a filmmaker friend with professional video editing software. The enhanced images revealed details that deepened the temporal impossibility. One woman's eyeglasses featured plastic frames with a translucent coral tint popular in 1991-1993, but virtually absent from modern fashion. Another guide's watch, visible when he raised his arm to point at something off-trail, was an oversized Casio digital model specific to early 1990s design aesthetics. Everything about them is period correct, James said. Which means either they're the most dedicated historical reenactors in the world, or, he didn't finish the sentence, none of them wanted to speak the alternative aloud. Marcus queued up a new video segment the others hadn't seen yet. Footage from the afternoon of June 14th, when the 2016 group had stopped for lunch at a meadow clearing. The scene showed Marcus's participants eating sandwiches, a few taking selfies with their phones. Nothing unusual. Then, at the 2-minute mark, one of the mystery guides appeared at the meadow's edge, partially obscured by low branches. She stood motionless for approximately 8 seconds, clearly visible in the middle distance. Her head turned slowly, scanning the clearing where the 2016 counselors and their participants were gathered. What happened next made Sarah audibly gasp. The woman's expression changed. Her eyes widened. Her mouth opened slightly in what appeared to be shock or recognition. Then she lifted one hand, not waving, but raising it palm forward in a gesture that looked like a warning or a plea. The motion lasted less than 2 seconds before she stepped backward into the forest and disappeared. "She saw us," Marcus said quietly. "Not just the camera. She saw all of us. The participants with their phones, the modern gear, everything. And she recognized that something was wrong." Sarah rewound the footage and watched again. The woman's face in that moment showed unmistakable distress, the kind of fear that comes from encountering something that violates your understanding of reality. "If they can see us," James said slowly, "and we can see them, then we're not looking at a recording or a ghost or anything passive. This is some kind of overlap. Two groups occupying the same space, 26 years apart, somehow perceiving each other." Marcus closed his laptop. "We need to find out who these people were in 1990. The search for 1990s camp records led Marcus to Patricia Morrison's office on a gray November morning. The director listened to his carefully prepared explanation. He wanted to create a retrospective video project comparing modern expeditions with historical ones, and needed access to counselor rosters and photos from the early 90s. Patricia seemed pleased by the initiative. She directed Marcus to the camp's archive room, a climate-controlled basement space where boxes of old documents, photographs, and memorabilia were organized by year. "Take your time," she said. "Most of that material has never been digitized. You might find some wonderful historical footage for your project." Marcus started with June 1990. He found expedition logs, medical forms, and several dozen photographs from that summer's programs. Most showed groups of teenagers at the main camp facility, posing with climbing gear, preparing meals, attending evening programs. A few photos captured wilderness expeditions, though none from the Desolation Ridge area where his mystery guides had appeared. Then, in a box labeled Staff 1989-1991, Marcus found something that stopped his breath. A group photo from the 1990 staff orientation, taken in April before that summer's season began. 23 counselors and support staff arranged in 3 rows in front of the camp's main lodge. And there, in the second row, 3 figures Marcus immediately recognized from his video footage. The woman in the center wore her hair in the same practical ponytail. Her face, younger by 26 years but unmistakably identical, matched the guide who'd made the warning gesture at the meadow's edge. To her left stood the man with the Casio watch. To her right, the second woman who'd carried the walkie-talkie. The photo caption identified them: Nicole Patterson, Derek Shaw, Amanda Foster, senior wilderness staff. Marcus photographed the picture with his phone, his hands trembling slightly. He continued searching the box and found individual staff files for all 3. Nicole Patterson, age 24 in 1990, had worked at Pine Ridge for 3 seasons. Derek Shaw, 26, was in his 5th year. Amanda Foster, 23, had joined the program in 1989. Each file contained standard documentation, certifications, emergency contacts, performance reviews. Everything suggested experienced, competent counselors with excellent records. Then Marcus reached the final document in Nicole Patterson's folder, an incident report dated June 18, 1990. The report described a wilderness expedition that had gone catastrophically wrong. A 3-guide team, Patterson, Shaw, and Foster, leading a group of 16 participants through the Desolation Ridge area. On June 15th, during descent from the ridge toward Thunder Creek, one of the participants had suffered a severe injury when a section of trail collapsed. The counselors had split up, Amanda Foster staying with the injured teenager, while Nicole Patterson and Derek Shaw rushed ahead to reach a location where their radio could contact emergency services. Rescue crews arrived by helicopter on June 16th. The injured participant recovered fully. But the incident report noted something troubling in its final paragraph. All 3 counselors had submitted statements describing a profound sense of disorientation during the emergency. They reported seeing other hikers who seemed to appear and disappear, hearing voices and equipment sounds that had no visible source. Derek Shaw had specifically mentioned seeing what he described as people dressed wrong for wilderness hiking, like they were from the future. The camp's director in 1990 had attributed these perceptions to stress and high-altitude exhaustion. The counselors received commendations for their emergency response and returned to work the following summer. Marcus took photographs of every page. When he emerged from the archive room 2 hours later, he had a name for the woman who'd tried to warn them across 26 years, Nicole Patterson, and he had confirmation that on June 15, 1990, her group had been in the exact same location where Marcus's 2016 expedition had passed, the Meadow Clearing, the Thunder Creek Descent, every frame where the mystery guides appeared. The temporal overlap wasn't random. It was precise, mapped to specific geographic coordinates and calendar dates. Sarah reached Nicole Patterson through a combination of online research and old-fashioned phone calls. The trail led from Pine Ridge's archived emergency contacts to a Portland address that no longer housed Patterson, then through property records to a current residence in Bend, Oregon. Sarah spent 3 days crafting an email that wouldn't sound completely insane, finally settling on, "I'm researching Pine Ridge camp history and found records of a 1990 expedition you led. Would you be willing to discuss your experience for a documentary project?" Nicole responded within 6 hours. "I've been waiting 26 years for someone to ask about that trip." They met at a coffee shop in Bend on a Saturday afternoon. Nicole Patterson was 50 years old now, a physical therapist with 2 college-age children, but she still moved with the easy confidence of someone comfortable in wilderness spaces. When Marcus, Sarah, and James showed her the video stills from 2016, her reaction confirmed everything they'd feared and hoped. "That's us," she said quietly, pointing to her own image captured in impossible resolution. "That's the jacket I wore on every expedition that summer. That's Derek with his map, and Amanda with the radio we used to call for help." She looked up at the 3 counselors. "How is this possible?" Marcus explained the footage, the timeline overlap, the geographic precision. Nicole listened without interrupting, her coffee growing cold as the story unfolded. When he finished, she reached into her bag and pulled out a worn notebook, her personal journal from summer 1990. "We saw you too," she said, "or people we couldn't explain. I documented everything because I thought I was losing my mind." The journal entries from June 1990 painted a mirror image of Marcus's investigation. Nicole described seeing impossible hikers wearing strange gear, lightweight fabrics that seemed too thin for wilderness conditions, bright synthetic colors unlike any outdoor equipment available in 1990, and devices she couldn't identify but that resembled small cameras or computers. Her June 15th entry, written the day of the emergency, contained the most detailed observations. During the evacuation, when Derek and I were rushing to reach radio range, I kept seeing 3 guides moving through the forest parallel to our path. They wore gear I didn't recognize, compression fabric shirts, streamlined packs with modern-looking frames. One was filming with some kind of camera mounted on his chest. They seemed to notice us too, made eye contact, then vanished when I looked directly at them. I know this sounds crazy, but they looked like counselors from the future. The trauma counselor who debriefed us after the incident told me it was stress hallucination, Nicole continued. Altitude sickness combined with adrenaline during the emergency. Derek and Amanda were told the same thing. We convinced ourselves to believe it, because the alternative was admitting we'd experienced something impossible. James asked the question they'd all been avoiding. "What do you think happened? What caused this overlap?" Nicole had spent 26 years considering that question. "The area where we saw you, where you saw us, has some documented geomagnetic anomalies. There's a USGS survey from the 1970s noting unusual compass behavior near Desolation Ridge. Local indigenous communities have stories about that valley being a place where time works differently. I'm not saying I have answers, but I think certain locations, under certain conditions, might allow past and present to perceive each other." She paused, then added quietly, "There's something else you should know. The participant who was injured that day, the reason we had to split up, the reason we were in that specific location at that specific time, her name was Michelle Garrett. She's alive and well, living in Seattle now. But she told me years later that during those hours after her injury, while Amanda stayed with her waiting for rescue, she saw things too. She saw counselors and hikers who shouldn't have been there, wearing impossible clothing, moving through the forest like ghosts from another time. Marcus Webb organized a meeting in March 2017, 9 months after the original expedition, bringing together everyone connected to the temporal overlap. Nicole Patterson drove down from Bend with Derek Shaw and Amanda Foster, both of whom had confirmed their own experiences with the future hikers they'd seen in 1990. Michelle Garrett arrived from Seattle, now 43 years old and working as an environmental engineer. And the 3 2016 counselors presented their complete video analysis, showing frame-by-frame evidence of 2 groups occupying the same wilderness space across 26 years. The evidence was irrefutable. The geographic precision was exact. The clothing, equipment, and behavioral details from both perspectives matched perfectly. 2 expeditions had somehow perceived each other across time, created recognition and reaction, then continued forward in their respective eras, unaware of how significant their experience would become. So, what do we do with this? Derek asked the question that hung over the gathering. Report it? Try to recreate it? Pretend it never happened? The group discussed options for 3 hours. Publishing the footage publicly would invite skepticism, exploitation, and disruption of the wilderness area where the phenomenon occurred. Reporting it to academic institutions or government agencies felt premature without understanding the mechanism. Trying to deliberately recreate the conditions seemed both impossible and potentially dangerous. Patricia Morrison, who'd been briefed on the situation and joined the meeting, offered perspective shaped by 3 decades running youth wilderness programs. This camp has always taught that nature holds mysteries we're meant to respect rather than exploit. Whatever happened between your 2 groups seems to have been a moment of genuine connection across time. Strange, yes, but not harmful. Perhaps the lesson is simply to document it carefully and hold that documentation with appropriate reverence. Michelle Garrett, whose injury had set the 1990 events in motion, shared her own conclusion. I've spent 26 years wondering if what I experienced during those hours was real or hallucination. Knowing that others saw the same impossible things, that there's video evidence now, gives me a sense of peace I didn't expect. Sometimes mysteries don't need solving, they just need confirmation that they actually happened. The group agreed on a protocol. Marcus would maintain the original footage in a secure archive, creating copies for each person present. Nicole would contribute her 1990 journal and the photographs from that era. They would document everything but refrain from public disclosure, treating the material as a trust to be preserved for future understanding when the mechanisms behind such phenomena might be better understood. Before leaving, Nicole asked to see the footage one more time, specifically the moment when she'd raised her hand in what looked like a warning gesture. Marcus played it on his laptop. The entire group watched in silence as Nicole's younger self, caught in impossible clarity 26 years after the moment was filmed, made that urgent palm-forward motion. I remember that exact second, Nicole said quietly. I saw all of you in that meadow. The modern gear, the phones, everything that told me I was seeing the future. And my first thought wasn't scientific curiosity or fear. It was worry. I wanted to warn whoever you were to be careful, to treat the wilderness with respect, to understand that you were walking in a place where the normal rules might not always apply. She looked at Marcus. I'm glad you were paying attention. I'm glad someone in the future was there to receive that warning. The Pine Ridge Camp continues to operate wilderness expeditions through the Cascade Range. Counselors still lead groups along the Desolation Ridge route, following the same trails where 2 expeditions briefly perceived each other across time. The geomagnetic anomalies remain unexplained. The overlap has never recurred, at least not in any documented way. But every June, Marcus Webb reviews his 2016 footage, studying those impossible frames where past and present momentarily recognized each other, and he remembers Nicole Patterson's warning gesture, a counselor from 1990 trying to protect people she couldn't possibly know in a future she would never visit, through a connection no one can explain. Some mysteries transcend solving. Some warnings echo across decades. And sometimes the wilderness reveals that time itself moves differently than we imagine, not as a straight line, but as something far stranger and more profound. The footage remains archived. The witnesses remember, and the forest keeps its secrets.